Hello. Going live without the music this time. Just giving this background. Hello, everybody. Just waiting for the Substack crew to funnel in. So we finally got around to having this episode. Now, unfortunately, hey, Ricky. Theodore, Ricky, hello. Okay. Mario, hello. Substack crew is slowly coming in. It's good to see. So, Adrian has been taking some time off lately. We haven't been in touch as much as I would like. I was also sick last week, but we had this scheduled and I didn't hear anything from him, and now he's MIA. So I'm assuming he can't make it, and there's a reason he also can't respond to me. I'm investigating. Generally, we have an agreement that we stream together. So, hello everybody. But we've pushed this one episode out for the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago he couldn't make it. Last week I couldn't make it. So I figured at the very least we could make some progress on it. So the topic for today is AI in code reviews. I'm hoping Adrian can join us. If not, I'll be brief, and I'll probably have to talk to Adrian regarding the decision not to have the solo streams. We'll see. Okay, Mario, hello. Feel free to chime in if you have any questions. We'll be covering. Wait, so here's the. Yeah, I still got the background. Hang on. So that's our agenda. We're going to look at CodeScene, we're going to look at AI in the pipeline, and your questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to chime in. Are you using AI? Are you using Copilot? Are you using agentic coding? Are you annoyed by it? Are you tired of it? Right, so we're trying to figure out what will make your life easier rather than just, drinking the Kool-Aid and experimenting. So we are pretty much experimentation. We do favor experimentation where I'm from. So we definitely wouldn't treat it as a negative. There we go. George, hello. Yeah, Substack crew is always very active. I think you guys overtook the LinkedIn crew. We're not streaming to LinkedIn today because I turned it off in case Adrian wasn't joined. We're streaming a LinkedIn on Adrian's account, so if Adrian isn't here, I turned it off. Sorry, LinkedIn crew. If you're watching on YouTube, that's why the stream didn't pop up on the event. So I've been experimenting a lot with AI in code reviews lately. No home runs yet, unfortunately. Robert, hello. What I did find to be useful for the teams that I was coaching is primarily just communication focused. So using AI to write messages, using AI to simplify messages. For example, if you're reviewing something, you don't know what to type, or you're annoyed, you're having a bad day. One of the best usages of AI in code reviews that I have found is to focus on the communication aspect. Is to say, hey, I want to communicate this, but I'm a bit tired and it's probably harsh. So simplify it down for me in simple language. And then usually just seeing it, like seeing the simplification, usually helps you sort of reframe it in a way that's practical. Or, you can say, hey, there's all these issues with this code review. I feel like I'm nitpicking. Just help me communicate the important bits. Like that is very useful, so that you could sort of have a let's say a temperament filter for how you write code reviews. So the one thing I don't use AI for in code reviews is code generation. I think it's just a blatant waste of time because it requires too much scrutiny, and the generated code inside the pipeline, while it's doing a suggestion, cannot run the pipeline. So for me, I haven't found an agent. So if you know of one that can do that, let me know. But I haven't found an agent that could run the pipeline mid-conversation with the suggestion that it's raising up. Again, the tools will improve over time. That doesn't mean that I'm saying don't use AI. What I'm saying is that currently there's nothing on the market where that would be let's say a respectful usage of your time or your team's time, if in case agentic usage is enforced on the pipeline. Where in your pipeline do you use AI? For those of you who are here, for those of you who can communicate, if you're here on YouTube, please say hello. I do believe YouTube comments are working. Are they? Are they? We are live on YouTube. Chat is working. Yeah, they should work. Right. So my question to you was, where in your pipeline do you use AI? Is it just the developer machines? Is there anywhere in the pipeline? Is it before development happens? Christian says hi from Bogota. Hey, hello, Christian. Christian, do you use AI in your pipeline anywhere? Or if you want, I can phrase the question differently. Why did you join today's episode? I imagine you had this one bookmarked for a long time, because we had this episode scheduled for May 21st. So I'm curious. What about AI in code reviews in your pipeline interests you? George says, I don't use it yet, learning about the possibilities. That's fair. That's fair. I have to admit, I was also very sort of bearish. So I'm open to experimentation, but I sort of have very limited patience for stuff that just doesn't work. So when people told me, hey, vibe coding and everything, I'm just like, look, like if I tried it, if if I don't get a simple answer from it very quickly, I'm not gonna, like I tried it. I try every new version of ChatGPT. I try every version of Claude. I try it, but I'm sort of, I'm very impatient with it, let's say, right? So I'm sort of limiting the amount of time that I waste in case what I'm getting is a bad response, etc. ad infinitum. What I am using actively, and we did have an episode on it, you can find it on the channel, where I use AI a lot for like advisory help, like getting like a gut feel check. My calendar, Gemini is very good for that. It's like, hey, I need to cancel a meeting. I'm super busy. Like my calendar is overloaded next week. Help me find the lowest priority. Here's my calendar for next week. Help me find the lowest priority slot and write the email for the one slot that I'm going to reschedule or cancel. Right. So I'm just asking Gemini. It's like, hey, on my calendar says you see my emails. Just pick the candidates for the low priority stuff and draft the email that will be, hey, sorry, I need to cancel, blah blah blah. Right. So that's very useful. So when it comes to developer time, just use AI for anything. My partner is a beautician. She works in a beauty salon, and sometimes they get like requests for couples, where a couple comes in for like a massage, and then The woman has like something planned that's like 90 minutes, and then there's a couples massage. And sometimes they just get the slots mixed up, and or somebody schedules and they mess up the time. And I said, well, that's great for ChatGPT. Like, why don't you just put it in ChatGPT and say, hey, are there any inconsistencies on my calendar? And she just immediately said, well, because we're not so technical. And I thought to myself, oh, of course, because you're not technical, right? Yeah, like for you, using ChatGPT isn't just alt tabbing and getting into the like just getting into the conversation. Like I constantly have conversations open with AIs. To them, taking a device, booting it up, logging in, buying a license if necessary, those are all the hurdles, right? So when I say, Rocco, Bilal, hello, thanks for joining. So when I say, okay, the music's getting annoying. I'm very sorry. So when I say using AI in code reviews, I'm not saying he uses for coding, right? But code reviews are generally a process, a conversation. There's other humans involved. So the purpose of the code review is communication and learning primarily. Some people use it for gatekeeping. Some people use it for like ivory tower architect behavior, where you're sort of gatekeeping certain design decisions, right? Where the dysfunction, where the organizational dysfunction is essentially saying, we have developers on our team who produce outputs of a questionable quality, so let's protect the code base from that. Like that's usually the shadow side of pipelines, right? Like a lot of teams use pipelines that way to protect the code base from their devs, right? Where I found it to be very useful is to just simplify down the communication aspect of. Christian said, I work as technical lead, so I find it interesting to me. I use Copilot to VS Code, built in chunks for my GitHub Actions pipelines or correct errors. All right. Okay. I also use Copilot. So again, I have to mention that I generally have Copilot turned off. And I've tried a few. I tried Junie, I tried Copilot, using Claude. I just find it way too distracting. I like the conversation aspect. The conversation aspect is a bit weird because it only works really well in Visual Studio and VS Code. And I'm not a VS Code user. I don't like using VS Code. I find like it's really good, like for dogfooding ChatGPT into my coding experience. It's really good because it's Microsoft in the Microsoft ecosystem. But the refactoring tools suck. And I'm a IntelliJ user, right? So like the loss of productivity I incur for using VS Code by losing access to the refactoring tools, to me is like a negative, is like a net negative, objectively a net negative trade-off. So even though the AI tools are a little bit more streamlined for using, the actual experience is like a net negative. Like I can see this a lot when I'm pair programming with others. So I'm a coach, I'm a technical trainer, do some leadership coaching and technical training, depending on like what the team needs, or like what the team needs the most. And it always comes down to this idea of where does the team struggle? Usually the team struggles in aspects of communication or scheduling their time or collaborating. So there's a lot of solo stuff going on. What I have seen as a, let's say, primary dysfunction is people just want to cram in AI, managers, especially non-technical managers, just want to cram in AI to the engineering teams, like figuring out, like experiment, just find a use case for it. And usually what developers draw to is like code generation. And it can generate code, but I find it like requires your full attention. And I don't find it to be like to me, that's like if it requires my full attention, there's like this huge trade-off where it's all in. And on the positive aspect, it's not really, it's not really driving any outcomes on the calendar to a significant degree. Where what does help, for example, is emails that you write, for example, and kind of reports, status updates. If you have any recurring emails, like similar emails that you just keep writing, AI is great for that, because you can say, hey, this was my email, like, can you rephrase this sentiment in the same format? For that, it works really well, right? So when I'm saying use code review and use AI in code reviews, to look for opportunities, do it that way. For example, if you have a pull request and you generally write 10 comments in a pull request, use AI for that. Like, simplify down, trim the unnecessary wording, or if you have terrible writing hygiene, maybe it will improve your grammar or typos. Use it for that, definitely. I've seen very little integration on that. I can show you CodeScene. This is another great example. So, show of hands. Is anybody here using CodeScene, Kodana, or something similar in their pipeline? While I set it up. It's already set up, don't worry. I just need to share the screen. Do let me know, because that's usually... Okay. So does any of you... Okay, no, hang on. This one. Huh. Okay, hang on. Let's change the background. Okay, let's do the animated background. Okay. And let me go to Zen mode. No, that's full screen Zen mode. That's not what I wanted. Zen mode? No. Let's just do this. How's this? Okay. And now font size. Ah, I see. Is it? Oof. It doesn't increase the font size on the right. Okay. So let's not do it that way. Let's do it this way. Does this work? I think this is better. Yes. Just let me get the right ratio. So you get the idea. And then I decrease the font size. So you get the idea. There's code here. It's messy. There's code smells in the code. Let me know if you can read it, by the way. I'm trying not to overwhelm you with like code on screen. People generally stop watching. That's not really the point. So this is an open source project called Bitburner. So what's going on the screen here? I can just actually make it bigger. Hang on. Can I make it bigger? Yeah, I can make it bigger. Right. So as you can see, CodeScene has this awesome plugin where you can just go into this problems area, into this problems mode, and it tells you there's a complex method, there's primitive obsession going on, bumpy road. You double click this, it shows you where it is. It gives you like this inline hint. You click it, it then opens up explaining the code smell, right? So you're using AI to explain code smells. So it's not telling you, it's not like a linter where it like underlines it and then it gives you an arcane error, but it's already using CodeScene's analysis tool, which I don't think is very much AI driven. I think it's like a pretty traditional linter under the hood, but it's working on the web, so it integrates with your GitHub repository, and then it's through that you download basically reports for the entire code base. And it can also mark hotspots, right? A hotspot would be this file has 20 authors, only 3 are still with the company, and the file changes often. Like there's a lot of pull requests involved in this file, right? So that it marks it as hotspot. Maybe that's a little bit more LLM driven. Smeller. And you'll have to explain that comment because I'm not sure I understood that. Smaller. I see. Maybe this. Is it better? Or this? Just let me know which one you prefer, because I probably don't have enough taste in like, oh, not a linter, but a smeller. I see. Yeah, so what it does is it helps you reason about your code base in such a way that you can sort of expand your code. You can see this code is ugly, for example. Like there's a lot of, there are helper functions in here. There's a lot of things going on. For example, this one is bumpy road and complex method and deep nested complexity and large method, right? So this is like a primary candidate for code smells, for refactoring, and then it basically tells me what's wrong with it. If I click it, it explains the code smell. Like, to me, that's the most important bit. Prior to them having this add-on, this is called ACE, CodeScene ACE. It's a VS Code and IntelliJ plugin. Prior to them having it, you had to create a pull request where you have this commit in, and then CodeScene will basically either annotate a long form comment on the pull request, or it will do so inline, sort of flagging, hey, is this a big issue, a critical issue? And the way you can configure CodeScene is you can say, this team on this project is focusing on tech debt removal, so we'll be very aggressive, and we will make these kinds of warnings errors. In another project, you might say, we're super busy, we need to learn, rather than just going all in on tech debt removal. So focus on learning. So don't be as strict on the warnings, or only be strict on the hotspots, or only be strict on our chosen file. Or there's a module where we need to be strict. If there's like anything like insurance policy related or payment related, like there we'll be strict. For the configs, for generated code, be less strict. So you can sort of scope out your strictness depending on what you're doing. Is you're doing change management, right? You're managing, okay, how is the team changing its behavior, its habits? And then you're saying, okay, like, do I want my CodeScene plus AI agent plus pull requests guard to be good cop, bad cop, something in the middle, more enabling or more gatekeeping, or sort of more of a hard ass and sort of trying to steer the team in the right direction. So it can help you sort of alleviate pressures that would usually have people, cause people on the same team to nitpick against each other. It's like, hey, we said this and this and this. I know I'm annoying, but can you like refactor it? And I feel that code reviews become a lot less toxic if you just have a tool doing it and it's objective with you. So one of the biggest issues with teams encounter with pipeline automation is that some automation basically forces developers to talk to each other when they're not pairing. So usually such teams are more prone, at a higher risk to be toxic in code review. So if you can automate parts of the code review which have to do with code smells, then there's less nitpicking going on, there's less toxicity, so there's less resentment. There is less chance for you to F something up, screw something up with regards to building resentment and negative emotion with your team, because you have an objective tool that's just communicating facts with you, rather than being judgmental or having opinion or being political about it, or etc. It also won't hold a grudge unless you ask it to. Right. So what this tool does is basically, hey, what's the code smell? What can we do here? I found one earlier, which is pretty cool. Right. So I can go to the problems. Right. I can see which ones. So these are mixed. These are some code smells. So, for example, function is overly complex. This is an analysis that WebStorm does. Large method, deep nested complexity, nesting depth for conditionals. This is from CodeScene. I just know it from how it's worded. And bumpy road, etc. Bumpy road, that's all from CodeScene. Primitive obsession, that's all from CodeScene. So we can choose one here. Let's choose one to refactor. Execute skill console command. Right, so this one this is a typical facade. It pipes in the arguments from the terminal, and depending on how many arguments there were, it's either help, or it's either defaulting to help, or it's a single argument command, or it's a double argument command, or it's a help with another argument, or it's something else, and we basically have to tell you, we're not giving you the help, but we're giving you the failed, like, hey, I don't understand this. Did you mean help? Right, so what's happening here is that this, for example, it says this is a complex method. Why is it a complex method? Well, because it has a lot of branches. There are if statements in the branches, and each if statement is a different, like each if statement has a different branch of behavior. So they're doing different things. They have different collaborators. As you can see, one of the branches is a for loop, two for loops. One of the branches has another if statement, another for loop, another, right? So it just breaks out in complexity. So it says, generally, you're going to split the function using extractions inside or decompose complex conditionals, right? So this is static. This is the help page, right? So when I clicked on the code smell, it gave me the help page from CodeScene for that code smell, contextualized to my file, right? So it says Bladeburner TS, line 266. There's this code smell. Okay, ignore the errors. Right? And then it basically tells me what's wrong with it, what's the solution. And if I click now on CodeScene Ace, it gives me a refactoring recommendation. So prior to this, it was a smeller, as Ant said. And now there's an AI tool called Ace that basically gives me a refactoring. So my litmus, again, it's not perfect. As you can see, there's no code highlighting. There's no code highlighting for the refactoring. It's not a perfect tool. It is using a local CLI tool with a access token that I had to configure to my cloud integration. The cloud integration has access to my GitHub repository, and this is an application running on the GitHub repository, monitoring my pull requests and monitoring my issues and monitoring my commits. Right, so like that's how the agent is not running on my machine. It's running very close to my central repository, one of my central repositories. In particular, this is an open source project, and CodeScene is running on my fork of the project. But as you can see, what it did is it identified that each branch is different. And what it did really well is it sort of guessed what it does. So it refactored, it extracted those branches of logic, and it picked reasonably good names for the functions of extraction. So usually what I'll have to do is extract this, give it a name, see if the arguments are relevant. Extract this, give it a name, see if the arguments are relevant. Extract this, give it a name, see if the arguments are relevant. Extract this, give it a name, see if the arguments are relevant, right? So, and then it extracts it, bam. I can say accept auto refactor. I don't know. Okay. I need to update WebStorm probably, but I'm not going to do it right now. So it extracts it. And what's most important, right? So again, if you're using AI tools, right now we use it for code generation. But I wouldn't call this code generation per se, right? There was no new behavior. I didn't ask CodeScene or Ace or WebStorm to code something for me. What I did is I already coded it, and it produced some code smells. So the AI basically went in. Now, behind the scenes, what it does is actually trying to perform the refactorings internally. And I think it's using those instruction tools, right? So what it actually did was extract method and refactor and rename. So it didn't write code, like it didn't generate text, but it actually ran the refactorings internally and see what that code looks like. I find this to be code modification with an AI agent that is working in much smaller steps, and the steps are actually meaningful. So The changes are all condensed. You can see it on the minimap. The changes are all condensed to like one area in the code base. It compiles. The tests are still passing. And what's most important, the code smell is being handled by a different level of the tool. And the code smell went away. Right? So the AI knows not to give me a suggestion that it would complain about. Usually people who use agentic tooling for like Claude, for example, is you usually need to prompt it that, hey, after every suggestion, after every step, run the linter, run the formatter, run the tests. This is this is non-negotiable. This is mandatory. This is very important. And if your suggestion fails on it, then fix them. Like, don't give it to me as a possible solution, as an acceptable solution. Just fix it or tell me there's no solution, right? So that's what people who use agentic coding generally fail to say. It's like, hey, if the AI did a mistake in generating code or like running functions of the IDE to refactor something, if it doesn't compile, don't give me the suggestion. Just don't waste my time. Like, don't give me a half-broken suggestion, then expect me to fix it, because that's a net negative. Like that's a net waste of my time, right? Because it requires way too much supervision. Usually what developers do is they just abort and then they just do it themselves. But then you also need to explain that, hey, you suck at this. I did it myself. Here's the update. It's not in the code base yet, so I'm going to commit it. Please refresh your context. And that usually takes so much time that if I'm pairing with somebody who's doing that, I usually give up and give them 30 minutes and then come back. So this is Ace. Just wanted to highlight this. Again, this was a cached refactoring. I just want to be completely honest in my review. Complex method, help pops up immediately. This is a help that is contextualized to my code base. It is relevant. The solution is here in a generic manner, and these links open your browser. When I click this button, it gives basically a conversation. You can see it refactoring recommendation. So the AI generated this MD file, right? So that's why it doesn't have code hinting, because I do not have a markdown reader that has linting. What I have to mention is that, for example, if I execute automate console command, for example, bumpy road ahead, what I can't do is I cannot tell it which of these problems to refactor. And this is what I wanted to highlight, because the other ones I already clicked today in the preparation for this stream. When I click this, you can see in the bar below, the suggestions from CodeScene are not instant. This is actually now contextualizing my code base and sort of coming up with a suggestion. So it's not fast. It's not instant. It's not like Copilot. And you see, okay, it has results. I see results. And this is the refactoring suggestion it came up with. So as you can see, it took like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. So it's definitely not a Copilot. It's more like if I want to make a step on this, it feels more like working with an agent rather than a Copilot, rather than like an inline GPT. So again, this one had many issues. This one was bumpy road, complex method, deep nested complexity, large method, yada, yada, yada. What it says, the refactoring improves code type and preserves the semantics of the code. Code smell refactor with overall code type, blah, 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 blah. However, some new, less severe code smells were introduced. This is what I like that CodeScene does. If you ever attended Sandy Metz's talks, Sandy Metz did this thing where she did this manually on stage. And what you will notice is that when you're refactoring something like this, where I don't want to close it. I can close it. When you're refactoring something like this that has multiple issues, usually what happens is that it'll take you like 5 steps to refactor it properly, or 10 steps. And steps 1 to 9 make the code uglier, make the code more messy. You probably notice this when you're following Michael Feathers' advice, or if you're doing TDD or ATDD, and you're sort of trying to refactor legacy code to get it into a test harness, all of your immediate, early, intermediate steps are making it worse temporarily. And then once you reach the end, and a lot of people give up, like that's why people complain about TDD and such in legacy code bases, is they give up too early because they see, it's getting worse, it's getting worse, and it's getting worse, and they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So they just give up. But usually how it goes is that it gets more complex, more complex, more complex, and then you solve it, and then the solution is much less, like a lot less complex than you started off with. So Sandi Metz has this great talk, like 10 years ago even, where she says, when you're refactoring, generally what you're doing is each code change, especially the nastier refactoring, like shotgun surgery, bumpy road, complex method, they take a code smell and they produce a lesser code smell, or more, or like a bigger number, and a 2 or 3 lesser code smells. And the idea here is that you're sort of solving the problem, but also modularizing the issues so that you can sort of get ahead of the problem rather than being constantly overburdened and constantly sort of overloaded with like the cognitive complexity of keeping it in your head. And I like that the tool itself has enough awareness to call itself out, right? So it's not like ChatGPT or Claude even, where it says, oh, I see it now, and then it just hallucinates for me, like with a straight face, right? Like it's like super confident that I got it now, this will solve everything. And I just have to continuously go back, no, you're hallucinating, do this and this and this and this is very important. And then the more you're sort of trying to like play a cowboy and sort of wrangle the hallucination of the AI, the more it just becomes a frustrating experience. So I have to commend it to the CodeScene team. I calm down. I have much more respect for a tool that is able to sort of be self-aware enough to say, hey, my output is not perfect. And even though it didn't address all the issues, it addressed what the AI thought to be the most important issue, and just raise awareness of there's probably more work to be done, but review this first. So what it did is it refactored a few things. So we can see I have the old code here. So it didn't change the guard clause, right? So there's a guard clause here. That one it didn't touch. What it did touch is that it left a comment here, and it saw that, okay, this is one bit of the complex stuff, and there's also some code duplication here. I can see the yellow bar, and this one it extracted. It identified that it requires arguments, etc. Right? And then it goes to the next one. Oh, this is inside that if statement. Okay, this one it left alone. Right? So it limited itself on like how big of a step it's gonna take, and this one it didn't touch. You see? This one it didn't touch. Right? Now, I would like if in the future the tool itself could highlight what it touched and what it didn't touch, right? But let's say I accept the refactoring. I am using Git here, so the changes are blue. This is from the previous refactoring. This is from this refactoring. So I'm using the minimap here to identify, okay, this is new. Okay, this is new. And you can see that the refactoring I just received also introduces a code smell, which is why it gave me that warning, right? So we went from very large, very complex, nested conditionals. It solved 2, but the function it extracted still has the problem. And it told me that this is going to happen, and I expected it, and now I find it, and it says, okay. So we went from 4 issues to 1, and to me, this is now an increment that I'm happy with, that I can sort of live with. And I could just say, okay, cool. You know what? Yes, you called it out. I agree. You didn't hallucinate when you called it out. That's very important. I respect you for it. And if I want to solve it, I can solve it. Or I can just move on with my life and be done with it, right? And what it did is it tidied up certain things. It extracted a few complex conditionals. I don't want to review the entire thing, but suffice to say, it limited, let's say, its appetite for how much stuff it's going to change or how much stuff is going to move around. Now, what I didn't check is whether there's some unexpected stuff that changed that might be an issue. And so I'm going to undo the refactors just so I can get a before and after sense. And the issue here is that I don't have a really good way of checking whether its output was good without running the entire pipeline, which is then what I would have done in that case. But at least I got some warning about what to watch out for. Right, so that's CodeScene. You can also then configure it to say, okay, in this file, because I know it's a hotspot, make it more aggressive, right? Like make it more aggressively lint stuff, make it force me to follow, like, right? So act as a gatekeeper on the pull request. So do not allow me to merge this unless I actually did address the code smell, right? So it can identify it, and it can also say, hey, if this is a complex method and the cyclomatic complexity was, or like the score from complexity, if it was 20, if my PR makes it 21 and we mark this one as a critical refactoring target, then it won't allow me to merge unless I bring it from 20 to 19, right? So that's one of those things that these kinds of tools can enable you. Again, that's CodeScene without AI. CodeScene already did this, and I can wholeheartedly recommend it. I use it with a lot of my teams. This is an open source project. So this is the free tier on an open source project. It has more functionality than this. What I can also show you is what it looks like in the browser. Now, I have to admit, CodeScene, when it comes to design in the browser, it's not the prettiest, right? It's just not. It's just not sexy. Like it's, you know, like it looks a little bit jank. I have to be honest with you. Where's my? What am I showing? I'm showing this. Is that the one I'm allowed to show? Yes, that's the one. Right. So, for example, CodeScene allows you to do this. It allows you to come in here and say, okay, where are the hotspots? Where are the refactoring targets? What's going on in the code base? This is the entire code base. These are the authors. You can also look for hotspots. This is the file we just reviewed, and it says, okay, there's bumpy roads, right? So it contextualizes, it analyzes, it sort of gives you the authors. I also contributed to this one. I have to sort of reduce complexity here, how it's changing, you know, when it's changing, what other files are changing, like what is it coupled to, what refactorings are you doing, what's the change coupling. So this is what the tool itself looks like. And you can look about this in many different ways. You can also see, for example, you can do a code analysis on code health, right? So it just has like a general score. You can also set goals. You can say, hey, this file, supervise it. Supervise means that we either plan a refactoring or we need to be more strict on introducing or solving code smells. We can also see team dynamics. So what's important is it can show you, not this one. You can see where people, like who did the most changes, right? So who owns which part of the code base. And you can look at knowledge risks, right? So you can configure CodeScene, you can tell it the names of the contributors, and you can say this person is still with the company, this person is not with the company, and then it can basically say, hey, if the code is owned predominantly by the person who's no longer with the company, attribute that as knowledge loss. So now changes to that file are riskier because nobody in the company is competent enough to review it, because the original author is, you know, we had brain drain in the company. So that makes that file riskier, which means that it becomes a riskier hotspot. And then we have rules for the benign stuff is at a low standard, like a non-strict linter rules or like a smeller rules. And the hotspots where there's more knowledge loss are at a stricter standard for code health. So that's the tool. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. I just like CodeScene. Kodana is very similar if you want to stay in the IntelliJ ecosystem, but it's price gated more towards enterprise usage. So even some of my clients that are using the IntelliJ ecosystem, it's just too expensive for them. It's like smaller startups. It quickly ramps up to like multiple thousands of dollars per month, and it becomes very difficult to justify that expenditure for a lean team. Whereas CodeScene is, I think, aggressively priced to like target all kinds of companies. So that's that. What else? Oh, so as a quick summary, when you can, if you're experimenting with AI, try to focus on the communication stuff. Right? So just try to focus on, am I writing a message? Am I writing a commit message? Am I writing a review? Am I unhappy with how I sound in the email, in the message? Are you prone to, so I'm not even going to ask, are you prone to being toxic in code reviews? Everybody's at the risk of being toxic, right? So everybody's at the risk of, when I'm in a rush, when there's a large PR, when I hate reviewing a certain PR, I'm not the kindest person, right? So I would always go down to this level of everybody can do mistakes, and really messy, mission critical, large pull request code reviews come with the risk of maybe bringing out the worst in people when they're under pressure. So just, pay that forward by saying, you know what, if I am prone to doing that, I'll let some kind of GPT help me, either a copilot, if you're using VS Code and you're reviewing, or I think VS Code has a GitHub plugin, so you can do GitHub compatible code reviews in VS Code. But I think most people use the browser or use a CI/CD tool, a plugin for the CI/CD tools, the plugin for the thing that's running the pipeline to do code reviews. Bitbucket does this a lot. If you're prone to doing that, just get a GPT in and just, hey, dial down the tone. I think I'm nitpicking. Can you just help me rephrase this in a friendlier tone, right? And make it shorter, right? And it's just, you can create like a little friendliness template for like how to prompt, like to explain to the GPT, I'm doing a code review in this language. Friendly means this and this and this and this. I want to communicate us and we, and being kind and helpful and avoiding nitpicking. And this is what nitpicking is. This is what's helpful. This is what's actionable. And then you just say, hey, this is what I want to write. It's very aggressive. Just help me simplify it down. That I can already recommend. This is something you can do today. This is something that doesn't require buy-in from any of your stakeholders, because you're not really sharing intellectual property, right? So the code in the code review is the company's intellectual property. The message you send to another human being is not, right? It might still be private, but it's not sharing code. It is not a company asset. But the emails are still private, right? So the information shared in the email might be partially company asset, which makes it a little bit safer to sort of share with GPTs, right? So I'm not sharing the code that I'm reviewing. I'm sharing the sentence I would have liked to review in one comment, in one of the reviews, in one of the pull requests, in one part of the code base, right? That can also sort of help alleviate any kind of angst if you're in a more regulated industry, or you might do it offline, right? So there are GPTs that just help you write, like sound friendlier or warmer or more soft-spoken in text. And there's a lot of those. If you're in a regulated industry where you cannot do so over the cloud, it's very likely that you're using a RAG, a MCP, or some kind of locally run or intranet run LLM agent, or you're building one right now, and that's why you're watching, where you can basically use it to do these kinds of discussions. So that's first, any kind of communication, text artifacts, comments, nitpicking, suggestions, discussions, emails, Slack messages, notifications, reports of any kind, especially those that you either put in a Jira ticket or a linear ticket or the roadmap or an email or an email report or a PDF that goes into an email. Those could all benefit from just being phrased more simply and in a more friendly manner. So definitely use GPTs for that. When it comes to managing your schedule, for example, I'm working on this, that other developer is working on that. Here's our respective schedules. Help us find a slot where we can pair. A lot of times, a lot of engineers that I coach have this sort of calendar angst. They're afraid to schedule something, right? They're usually receiving meetings and they're afraid to say no. So when they're receiving meetings, it's just reviewing how does their calendar, like they just don't feel in control of their calendar, to feel like more victimized, right? So what I usually tell them is like, well, if you're not going to say no to meetings aggressively or leave the meetings early as you should, if they're too long, or give feedback on the meetings, or schedule your pairing sessions with other developers, then use a GPT of some kind. If Gemini is allowed and you're using Google Calendar a lot, just use Gemini and say, here's my calendar, here's my coworker's calendar. Just help me find a mutual slot for a 2-hour pairing session. And it will help you do that, right? And then you can use that to sort of ease your development time. Because again, that slot might be used for code review. And it's possible that you have asynchronous PRs or asynchronous code review processes, because like that human interaction of agreeing on a slot is just too, there's too much friction to doing it manually. Like you would need a secretary. But rather than doing the review with AI and then you just have to review it still, if you have this like 2 humans need to review it, if I added an AI, it's not making review easier, because you have an agent, I have an agent, you have a copilot, I have a copilot. Now there's 6 people. Like there's 6 entities modifying the code and having like opinions. It's not making the problem easier, right? So if the problem is going to be hard and it will take you humans to do it, just use AI for everything surrounding it: logistics, meetings, emails, text, comments, even commit messages. Please don't write long commit messages. It's 2025. Nobody's reading them. If the commit message is empty, I can generate one from the commit itself. Like it's 2025, right? If the commit message says blah, I can ask ChatGPT to generate a commit message for me based on the commit. Like I don't need you to do it at commit time. I can just do it myself. I pair with a lot of engineers who obsessively try to write the perfect semantic commit message, and it's just a huge waste of time. So if you're doing that, now you know. Now you know. And you have my blessing if you need it to stop doing that. Don't, like, if you're doing a TDD step and it took you 10 minutes and then you spend 3 minutes writing the perfect commit message, like, just don't. Just move on with your life. The other thing is, if you're going to use it in the pipeline, another great way to, and this is a little bit more experimental, and it definitely requires your organization to be a bit more tech savvy and AI savvy, is if you're using a MCP server, right? So if you have a MCP server, what you can do is you can hook it into the pipeline, and you can basically use it as a soft warning. So not blocking, but you can basically say, hey, this commit came into the pipeline. Is there anything inconsistent with this commit? Is there anything weird about this commit? Is there anything, and you might define what inconsistent, what weird, what potentially erroneous looks like, and you can use it to basically flag notifications or warning messages on the build artifact. So, like Snyk, for example, that is looking for that is acting like a linter and is looking for security vulnerabilities. If you're using an MCP that also has access to the linear, for example, if you have a prioritized backlog on linear, what you can do is you could tell a GPT is like, hey, if we're doing a lot of releases on stuff that is not a priority, flag that as an issue. Because that's what I would do as a coach, right? It's like, hey, if your team has 2 priorities and they're working on 7 different things right now, that's fine as long as the priorities are what's getting the most attention, right? But if unrelated things that are not in the backlog, or if you're doing Scrum, if things that are on the lower end of the priority spectrum in the backlog, in the sprint backlog, is what's getting attention, or things from the previous week, or God forbid, things that are not in the backlog, if that's happening, alert somebody. Because that is generally something very fuzzy that takes an agile coach or a scrum master, or it's just these roles are kind of pointless. Like, you shouldn't have a full-time role. Like, one of the engineers should be the scrum master. You shouldn't have a full-time scrum master. I think that's my opinion. No hate, but no disrespect. But I think a lot of project management and project owner and scrum master roles are just masquerading a feature factory, and they're just part of the problem. Your team should be able to do it themselves. Right. So what I would like to know, the reason we're looking at burn down charts and similar is that we want to say, okay, is the business capable of focusing on one thing? If we're focusing on one thing, we have 10 devs. Can the devs work together as 10 people on one thing? Or is our top priority only able to make progress with one dev? And then we sort of try to force it, like, there is a top priority and we can have multiple people work on it if we separate the back end from the front end, from the mobile app, from the spec, from the estimation. And then maybe we can have 5 people kind of working in parallel on different ends of it. But that's not collaboration. That's just capacity planning mixed in with some like weird dependency fragmentation. Everybody else on the project is working on something else, right? And that's very poor project management. That's very poor product engineering. And basically what you're doing is running a feature factory, and that feature factory by definition cannot be efficient. Right? It will always produce very poor business outcomes. So I would attack like that kind of behavior as trying to optimize the feature factory is a waste. Like, we should stop the feature factory, not make it go faster. Because if you make it go faster, the feature factory becomes a bigger feature factory. And if it's producing waste, it will just increase the rate at which you produce waste, which is a net negative for the business because it prevents us from focusing on the top priority. So if you have AI tools, if you can give it these decision-making spaces of, hey, AI, like if you have an MCP or a RAG, but I find it difficult to put a RAG in a build pipeline, and it's easier with an MCP. Just like, hey, the sprint goal is this. Just send out an alert when the team is pushing commits on something that doesn't seem related to the sprint goal, right? Like that's very useful, because if a project manager does that, it might seem nitpicky. If a robot does that, you sort of like there's nothing for you to like resent, right? It's just like, the linter is bothering me again. But there's no human, right? Like, it won't deteriorate your relationships with the team. It won't build as much resentment. It won't impact your psychological safety negatively. It's just like, hey, the robot's saying we're not following along the main priority. Is it right? Yes. Or no, it's wrong. We will tweak it or turn it off. But if it's right, it's like, hey, interesting. The robot thinks we're not following the main priority. Why is that? Because that's what I do. As a coach, it's like, hey, you said this is really important. Like, why are you? And then we had a plan, and then now you're doing everything else. But right, because teams are prone to procrastinate. So AIs are great for that. It's like when I'm reviewing code. Also, another thing you can use AIs for. if you want to have a really low threshold for like tech savviness, you don't have a RAG, you don't have an MCP. Nowadays, there are very simple integration points for AIs in pull request tools. Bitbucket, GitHub, Azure DevOps I think is the CI/CD tool. I'm not that familiar with the Microsoft ecosystem, forgive me. But what you can do is you can configure it in such a way that you can say, hey, we're prone to writing very large code reviews and pull requests. That is, lines of code is a very weird, like, hard rule, because lines of code themselves aren't like a great way to like feature gates to instill smaller PRs in a sensible way. But what you can do is you can create a tool, like an LLM assisted tool that says, if lines of code is bigger than X, analyze it and make a suggestion to split up the PR. Like block the PR and say, hey, analyze it and see if it needs to be split up, and create suggestions on how to split it up. Or explain to the developer respectfully why the PR should be split up and how it could be split up. That's a very good way of like using AI in your code review pipeline, because a lot of and if you're familiar with the Dora group, so it's, let me check real quick. It's in my email. So if you follow Adrian Tack, if you go to the Dora community discussion --code reviews, Adrienne has a great episode about how to communicate respectfully within code reviews. And she highlights that the biggest issues in code reviews is usually that our subjective feelings are coming through, and you can't stay objective on the code, and that it is our problem that we are solving together, but rather they quickly derail into attacking the developer, the author of the PR, the code. Now, not consciously, but sometimes yes. And like when you use the word "you," I think that's she did a meta-analysis of like what kind of phrases make code reviews more toxic, and it's usually when you're using the word "you," that's usually the first door that opens up the guardrails to toxicity. It's like, you did this and you did this. If you do this, like it just keeps barreling it down. So the biggest issue, right? So it's people hate being micromanaged. People hate having bad relationships with their boss, and people hate being sort of politically nitpicked or micromanaged through code reviews. All right, like people, I mean engineers, or at least contributors to code in some fashion. Designers have the same issue, right? So one way to avoid that is to just put guardrails in place when that happens, right? So you can just have like very simple rules of, hey, like focus on the code, not the person, and make sure the code reviews are not too large. And then too large with lines of code, that's annoying as a feature gate, because if you use npm and you commit package JSON, that will also trigger it, and then you need an exception for that rule, and it's just annoying. But RAGs or LLMs that are sort of a little bit more contextually aware of what's going on, they are very good candidates for just having like a feature gate for, hey, no, PR is too large, just please make it smaller, give a few suggestions, and reject it, right? Or close the PR immediately and send the developer feedback of why that happened and what they can do to resolve it, to make PR smaller. Because a lot of people don't know how to stack diff, they don't want to stack diff, they don't know how to break up large PRs, they don't know how to rebase PRs, they don't know how to split up PRs, they don't know how to patch PRs and extract PRs into two PRs, right? Because this is non-trivial, right? If you have a very large PR that's 2,000 lines of code, and I tell you, no, let's start with one that's at most 200, that is a very complex problem if you've never done it before, and if you have to do it from 2000 down to 200, right? So you sort of have to now create an artifact where you need to undo 90% of your changes, and somehow magically need to put together the remaining 10% in such a way that it still compiles and it is still in a sensible increment. The whole point of TDD and similar tools is such that you already create the code at that scale with that in mind, but a lot of people miss this, and they just go in at it thinking that that is actually a testing issue or design issue, not that it's like a holistic sort of development lifecycle issue. So those things. If you want AI in your pipelines, definitely suggest having like soft guardrails on priorities, on things that like don't match your planning software. It's easier to connect MCPs or RAGs with your Jira or with your Linear. Have alerts for too large PRs that can be a little bit fuzzy and soft, right? Definitely use it locally for improving your language and making it a little bit more, non-violent and sort of inclusive. Not inclusive in the sense that you need to be, hyper censored, but inclusive in the sense that, hey, let's focus on the code. Let's focus on us. This is not your work, your branch, your PR. This is us trying to merge something. Let's treat it like we, me the reviewer, you the author, we are trying to merge this code, like so that you can then help it phrase it in such a way. Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of CodeScene. I just showed you what you can do with it. CodeScene Ace is a rather recent tool that I think they've launched last year. And what it allows you to do is the things that it would alert you as smells, it helps get documentation about the smell and locality about the smell into your IDE. And Ace, the new tool, also gives you suggestions of how to resolve it. So you're, for example, if it says, oh, do extract method or introduce parameter object, if your IDE is capable of that, it'll also give you like an AI suggestion of how to make that happen locally. That is super useful because a lot of people say, oh, if the solution to shotgun surgery is this and this and this and this, and then it's already difficult to spot the code smell, let alone actually apply the refactoring correctly. Because maybe they are using VS Code and they don't know which tools to implement, and a lot of VS Code extensions that come with refactoring tools are actually malware, and then you install a bunch of plugins that you think are actually helping refactor, but they're just malware. They're just security issues in your software, which is why I use IntelliJ, by the way, because PHP projects notoriously don't have refactoring tools in VS Code. So I work in JavaScript, TypeScript, PHP, Node, and Go, and a little bit of C++. So that's my ecosystem. And a little bit of C#. And VS Code is only good for one of those. So for all else, it's quite a terrible. Anyway, not to diss on VS Code, but I have my reasons for favoring the IntelliJ ecosystem. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, we've got 5 more minutes, and then I'm wrapping up. Yeah, Ben, hello. Rick, I didn't see you jump in. Sorry, I closed my Substack chat overlay when I screen shared. I'm now catching up. We had all your comments on YouTube. Let me check LinkedIn, because maybe... Okay, there were no comments on the event. Actually, let me check. It's Adrian's event, so maybe it's on Adrian's... Again, normally I wouldn't have streamed without Adrian. But we already moved this session twice, and I didn't check with Adrian if he could join, and I couldn't contact him for this session prior to starting. So I do apologize. I do apologize to both you, the audience, and Adrian for breaking the rules a bit today. Okay, yeah, there was no comments that I missed, as far as I can tell. Cool. If you have no further questions, I'll update you on what happens on next week. We have a episode planned for OTJ for next week as well. But I need to check in with what's going on with Adrian to be sure. If you want to stay in touch, I'm also streaming a lot on Crafting Tech Teams. Right now, I'm writing quite a large article, a longer article on TDD and mocks and sort of how to reasonably approach learning and applying test doubles, because I think that helps a lot. If you can master that, that helps a lot. Surprisingly, in 2025, it's still very difficult to get like a meaningful single source of literature where you could just learn it very quickly. That's what I started writing. I might have a workshop if you're interested. Do let me know, but that's more for a future conversation. And our No Speculation Engineering Leadership workshop is coming up, focusing predominantly on like how to not lose your wits about roadmaps, estimations, etc. To sort of go from feature factory to more product-led engineering. That's coming. I don't want to overwhelm myself. Summer is here. We're gonna have like summer vacation in a month, and then you'll probably have it as well. Right now I'm doing writing, focusing on the writing, and that article should be coming out this week, along with probably a lot of live streams explaining it and going into detail about it, possibly a workshop. If you have any comments that I'm gonna miss now because I'm about to close the stream, if you're typing hastily now, feel free to DM me. Michael, you just joined, but I'm about to wrap up. I'm very sorry. There will be a recording. If you can check it out on YouTube, there will be a recording. And on Substack, I will be sending out the recording of this at a later point. I still haven't automated the resending of these recordings. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me. You can DM me on Substack. You can follow me on Substack on Crafting Tech Teams, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Dennis Chahuk. Or you can just search for Coach Dennis and you'll find me. All right, here's my quick links. This is my Mentor Cruise link in case you were looking for one-on-one coaching for any kind of business collaboration where you would like the entire team to receive coaching or technical training. Just contact me directly on LinkedIn. All right, thanks for attending today. Have a good one. I'll send you off with some gentle elevator music and see you soon. All right, ciao.